When we talk about professional standards, as I pointed out last week, we are going to talk about non-public companies as well as public companies, with a greater focus for our purposes being on public companies. And the reason I make that distinction is because we have sets of standards that apply to public companies and sets of standards that apply to privately held companies. And so the AICPA Statement on Auditing Standards governs privately held companies and also publicly held companies if there's not a PCAOB standard, right? So when the PCAOB, because remember, the PCAOB was basically formulated after all of the audit failures and accounting failures, right? After Enron, WorldCom, it arose out of Sarbanes-Oxley Act for the most part. And so the PCAOB is relatively new, a new regulatory body. And the PCAOB became responsible for public oversight over the accounting profession after those scandals. And one of the things that the PCAOB started to do was issue standards, right? So, for example, when we talk about risk assessment, we'll talk about the risk assessment standards, and you'll see that the PCAOB has several risk assessment standards in response to what they saw as deficiencies in the auditor's assessment of risk as they were auditing their clients. And so the PCAOB issued these risk assessment standards, and those risk assessment standards supersedes the AICPA standards on risk assessment if you're a publicly held company. So publicly held companies have to follow the PCAOB risk assessment standards. And not the AICPA standards. So there are a lot of standards that the PCAOB did adopt from the AICPA, or the Auditing Standards Board. So they do. So you will see there's an overlap. But when there are specific PCAOB standards, for publicly held companies, auditors have to follow the PCAOB standards. So you'll see that as we're going through the semester, we'll talk about PCAOB standards, which are usually termed AS, Auditing Standards, right? So it'll, for example, the risk assessment standards are AS-12 and AS-13. So we'll refer to those standards, and then you'll see in some cases we'll have statement on auditing standards such as SAS 99, which pertains to fraud, right? Because the PCAOB at this point, they haven't issued a specific standard on fraud or auditors' responsibility with respect to fraud. So auditors follow the statement on auditing standards issued by the AICPA. Okay, so we'll see for publicly held companies, we'll see both standards